Okay, let's dive in. Today, we're tackling something pretty significant happening in Burkina Faso.
Yeah, the government there, under Captain Ibrahim Traoré, has decided to nationalize its gold mining operations. Big move.
Definitely. And the sources you sent over, well, they frame this very specifically.
They do. They present it mostly as a stand against what they're calling neocolonialism.
Right, and part of a much bigger picture unfolding across Africa, according to this material.
Exactly. So our mission here is basically to unpack what these sources say happened, get into the historical context they provide, look at the potential implications as they see them, and, pull out the key takeaways for you.
And it's really important we stress this. We're working solely with the perspective offered in these specific sources. Our job is just to explore and relay that viewpoint impartially. We're not endorsing it.
Couldn't agree more. The material makes it clear this isn't just some dry economic policy shift in their view.
No. How are they framing it?
Well, one source literally calls it economic warfare.
Wow. Okay. Economic warfare against what the system they think has been exploiting them.
That's the argument presented, yes, against a system they see as deeply entrenched.
Okay, so let's get to the core event then. Burkina Faso seizes control of its gold mines.
Correct.
And the leader driving this, according to the sources,
Captain Ibrahim Traoré.
and the immediate impact described is pretty stark.
Oh, yeah. Foreign companies out. The state itself is stepping in to take direct control.
And the sources explicitly link this action back to that economic warfare idea.
Directly. They position it as a direct hit against that neocolonial structure they describe.
That framing, it really makes you want to know the why, doesn't it? What's the history here, according to them?
It does. And the sources spend quite a bit of time on that. They paint this picture going back centuries.
About resource extraction.
Exactly. Foreign powers taking Africa's resources. And the sources argue this left a legacy of, poverty and instability across many nations.
And the suggestion in the material is that political independence didn't actually stop this economic pattern.
That's precisely the point they hammer home. Even after independence, countries like Burkina Faso, they argue, stayed in economic chains.
Chains specifically tied to resources.
Yes, they mention foreign control over key things like gold, obviously, but also uranium, oil, the valuable stuff.
Okay, so according to this perspective, where did the profits from all that actually end up?
Mostly, the sources claim, in the pockets of foreign corporations and a small local elite.
And they contrast that sharply with the lives of ordinary people.
Very sharply. They talk about millions lacking basics, clean water, jobs, schools. This whole historical backdrop is presented as crucial for understanding why Traoré would make such a move now.
Which brings us to Captain Traoré himself. How do the sources introduce him?
He's described as a young military officer, just 34, came to power in a coup back in 2022.
And what's the promise of his leadership as presented in this material?
The core promise mentioned is restoring dignity and sovereignty to the people of Burkina Faso.
And how is he perceived, according to these authors?
They portray him as being seen again by the authors and supposedly by many on the ground as a totally new breed of African leader. Young, bold, very much anti-colonial in his stance.
Did the sources mention any earlier actions he took that sort of paved the way for this nationalization?
Yes, they detail a few things. Distancing the country from France, for instance, which used to have a lot of influence.
Okay.
Shutting down foreign military bases is another one mentioned.
Right.
And building new alliances, specifically with neighboring Mali and Niger. These are all presented as pretty clear signals of a major shift happening.
Okay, so with that context, let's look at the actual mechanics of the gold nationalization. What does it mean practically, based on the sources?
Practically, it means the foreign companies running the mines are gone, finished. The government, the state, is taking over the operations directly.
And the stated reason for grabbing control of all that gold money?
The sources are explicit. The plan is to pour that money back into the country. Things like infrastructure, schools, healthcare, and very importantly, given the region, boosting security for the population.
And the sums involved.
Yeah.
The sources make it clear this isn't small change, right?
Not at all. They really emphasize the scale. Burkina Faso is apparently the fourth largest gold producer in Africa.
Fourth largest, wow.
Yeah. So the sources stress this isn't just symbolic. We're talking billions of dollars, potentially. Billions.
Which could genuinely transform the country if, as the sources say, it's actually used for national development.
That's the critical if they highlight, yes. The potential is huge, according to this material.
Now, these sources, they don't just look at Burkina Faso alone, do they? They fit this into a much broader narrative.
Absolutely. This is where they talk about a second wave of African independence.
His second wave. What's the idea behind that?
The core idea presented is that this isn't isolated. It's part of a wider trend, particularly in the Sahel region, maybe even further, of nations rejecting what the sources call Western domination.
Do they give other examples to back this up?
Several. They point to Mali kicking out French troops.
Right.
Niger stopping uranium exports, which mainly went to France. Guinea rewriting its constitution framed as reclaiming sovereignty. Even places like Chad and the Central African Republic are mentioned as shifting their alliances, looking more towards the east.
And how is this second wave different from the first one back in the 50s and 60s, according to the sources?
They argue it's deeper this time, not just about political borders on a map.
More fundamental.
Yes. The fight, as they describe it, is over control of resources, economic systems, even mines. They talk about cultural and intellectual independence, too. It's positioned as a real challenge to the established global order.
Okay. Given that kind of framing a direct challenge, how do the sources say this is all being received, especially by, say, Western governments or companies?
Well, according to the material, the reaction from Western governments and corporations is, perhaps unsurprisingly, described as concerned.
Concerned. Okay, and the Western media's take?
The sources claim there's a common narrative in Western media outlets that labels leaders like Traoré as, dictators or militants.
And they contrast that with?
With how they allege the people in these African nations often see these same leaders.
As heroes.
That's a word used, yes. As heroes standing up for their countries.
The sources also bring up something about a lack of coverage, particularly of this gold nationalization.
Yeah, they mention a perceived media silence in major Western news networks about this specific event.
And what reason do the sources speculate for that alleged silence?
They suggest it's basically to protect the existing system. A system, they argue, that benefits from Africa being divided or kept quiet. So downplaying events that challenge that status quo serve certain interests.
And again, just to be crystal clear for everyone listening, we are simply relaying these perspectives as presented in the source material we reviewed. We're not taking side here.
Exactly. Just laying out what the texts themselves say.
So looking forward then, what potential future implications do these sources discuss?
Well, there's a strong hint of a possible domino effect.
Meaning?
Meaning, if Burkina Faso actually pulls this off, successfully manages its gold wealth and improves things domestically, other nations might look at their own resources and think, hey, maybe we can do that too.
Right, it could embolden others.
Precisely. And they also describe this emerging alliance.
An alliance between?
Between some of these nations mentioned earlier, like Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger. An alliance, the sources say, is built on wanting self-reliance, shared defense, and what they call true independence, beyond just politics.
So in this view, gold is really just the start.
That's the strong implication. The sources suggest future battles, let's say, could be over control of oil, water, maybe even technology access, and cultural influence.
The whole approach described sounds incredibly assertive.
It really does. The way the material portrays these leaders, they're not asking for permission from anyone.
Just taking action.
Taking back power is how it's phrased. Aiming to rebuild Africa on their own terms, basically.
There was that metaphor they used at the end.
Ah, yes, the fire metaphor. They say Captain Ibrahim Traoré has lit a fire, and it's spreading across the continent. It's a powerful image.
It really is. Okay, so just to recap, we've looked at Burkina Faso nationalizing its gold under Captain Traoré. We explored the historical context the sources provide, the massive economic stakes involved, how they place this within that broader second wave idea, and the different reactions described in the material.
And all of that, every point drawn strictly and solely from the source documents you gave us, we've just laid out the information and the specific viewpoints contained within them for you to consider.
Exactly. Which leaves us reflecting on that fire metaphor from the sources. The big question they seem to pose is, will this fire just burn down old systems, or could it actually ignite, a new era of African pride, power, and prosperity? As you've heard us discuss this material, what aspects of this whole dynamic as it's presented in these sources really stand out to you?